on two sessions. We welcome back Victor Gao, chair professor at Sochow University. Good to see you again, Victor. You know, I got a ton of messages this morning when China released some of the statements. And the reason I bring that up is because everybody is waiting to see what China is going to do and what they're going to say. So let's start with the growth target. They said a growth target of about 5%, moderate, if you will. Some were expecting a little more. How do you read into that growth target?
Well, Premier Li Keqiang, in his work report today, announced 5% GDP growth for 2023. Now, this is very prudent but highly conservative. The overall views in the market is that the growth rate for this year will be higher than 5%, if not much higher than 5%. Whether it will be 5.5 or 6% or even as high as 8%, it is uncertain. However, I think this year's growth is against very slow growth in 2022, largely caused by the dynamic zero COVID policy. And by now, I would say normalization has been achieved, not only in daily lives for the 1.4 billion people in China in general, but also almost all aspects of economic life.
Right. And Victor, it is extremely difficult to predict what's going to happen over the course of a year. We could not have predicted what happened even last year, even though things are much clearer, it appears to be. But there's one question about the Chinese consumer that a lot of people are talking about is, will they come out and spend like what we saw in other countries in terms of boosting the economy? Because that could be very much a big wild card. Some are saying consumers could be restrained. Others are saying that they could just go crazy and spend.
I would say for 2023, a significant increase in consumption is widely expected. Why? Because for 3 years, there has been a pent-up demand in consumption, mainly because for the past 3 years, there was disruption of daily life and economic activities. Service industry in China was very much negatively impacted, and now everything is normal. And I would say people want to spend. Now, on the other hand, the government also need to put in a lot of incentives to make sure that the spending and the consumption can take place more smoothly. For example, for 1 year at least in the past, there was very heavy government restrictions on buying for apartments or houses in China throughout the country. And I would say many of these restrictions were well-intentioned, I would say. However, given the circumstances as they are today in China, these restrictions need to be very much removed. And if you just talk about that, I would say the pent-up demand among the Chinese consumers to buy more houses, more apartments in all parts of China would significantly increase. Now, on the other hand, spending for cars, especially electric cars, both domestic brands as well as international brands, etc., is widely expected. So you are talking about consumers in China looking at major items, for example, and this will really release a lot of consumption.
Right. I mean, that's absolutely huge. And then there's also the issue of still the reopening, where the hospitality and the travel sector, not only domestic travel but international travel, could also be a big boost to the economy, would it not?
Absolutely, because I can tell you, I live in Beijing, and as far as I can see, all the service entities, restaurants, catering services of all kinds, hotels, tourism, etc., they are all up and running. And this is in sharp contrast with 2022 and 3 years in the past. And if we just look at the service industry itself, I would say the normalization would mean emancipated demand, both, as you mentioned, domestically in China as well as abroad. And many countries are actually rolling out the red carpet in welcoming the incoming Chinese tourists. This will be a stimulus. And on the other hand, I think comparing 2023 with, let's say, 1978, 1979, there is an over-eagerness to work and to spend in China because 2023 is a very extraordinary year. This is the first year of normalization of daily lives and daily.
I agree. I think it's going to be a big year. I look forward to visiting you, Victor. The other big news that came out was defense spending was projected to be up 7.2%. And I'm curious, one, are you surprised by that? And two, what does that mean for the international audience?
Well, first of all, China's national defense is purely for defense. It is not for example, expansions abroad, etc. Secondly, the overall national defense spending in China is only a fraction of that of the United States. And this is against the background that China actually faces a much more complicated geopolitical overall situation than the United States. For example, the United States more or less has only 2 land neighboring countries. China has 14, and the United States does not have significant maritime neighboring countries. China has 6, for example, and this means that other things being equal, China's national spending should be larger than that of the United States. But China's national spending now is only a fraction that of the United States. On a per capita basis, China's national spending is probably one of the lowest in the world. Further, China's national spending only accounts for about 1.3% of the GDP, whereas the US national spending accounts for a much higher, if not double the size of the percentage in the GDP.
Okay, Victor, very interesting, and I think these statistics, I think the world needs to know that there are very complicated situations in the world. In any case, Victor, I appreciate your analysis on this. As always, great to see you, my friend.
Thank you very much for having me.